What's up, everybody? It's Joe, and I've got a real quick intro for you this week. There's no real new news, so I'll get you right to our game night review right away. First up, The Handies. If you haven't watched them yet, what are you doing? They're our very own film awards ceremony for the year of film in 2017. Check them out on our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com, or on our YouTube. I almost forgot our website there. Next up, the Facebook group. A lot of you guys are joining. Keep it up. That's How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the Facebook group. Get into that. And lastly, official How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up merchandise. It's here, it's inexpensive, and it's a great way to support the podcast. T-shirts are only $9.99, and for $2 more, you can get our package deal with stickers and koozies thrown in with your t-shirt. How cool is that? Probably not as cool as getting into this episode. We're reviewing Game Night this week. Enjoy. Hi, my name's Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week we'll be reviewing Game Night.
That's right, Joe. And whoever wins tonight will be walking away with a new car!
That's actually not true, Mike. There is no car. Hey everyone, and welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting debilitated and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And thank you to Dan Martin on Facebook for that synonym suggestion. You can hit us up on Facebook or any of our other social media if you have other synonym suggestions. And let's move right along. We're going to drink some beer tonight.
Still waiting for that Dan Martin guest spot.
Still waiting. Oh, Dan, come to us.
But yeah, we have Hollandia.
Premium.
It looks like it's premium. And we got this little tall boy can. Yeah, I'm, again, at a loss for what we haven't done in over 2 years of different beers every single week.
I thought you were going to say money.
That too. I've ventured into a different aisle, which has beer from other countries, which I believe this is. So
I'm assuming this is from Holland, right?
Oh, most definitely.
Does it say though?
No. Let's take
it. Just says imported from somewhere.
It's from somewhere.
We can presume that it's Holland. Let's crack this bad boy open. Our tall boy cans.
It doesn't taste like much. This is like the lightest of like what?
Salty.
Mm-hmm. This tastes like an ultralight Heineken or something.
Yeah. Again, it reminds me a little bit of Natty Boh again, in that kind of like salty light beer category. There was something else we drank recently that reminded me of Natty Boh that was similar to that. National Bohemian, for those who were uneducated, as I was until we drank it.
Yeah, no, all I can taste is Heineken. Or just...
It doesn't really... I don't really get the Heineken. The label makes me want to think that it's going to be like Heineken.
Oh no, I can taste that skunkiness like from a fucking mile away. In this,
I feel like I'm not getting that. Like it feels like so much salt rather than like the dankness of.
I'm actually not
Heineken.
Getting salt at all. Mike and I are drinking
just
two different beers.
But we're reviewing Game Night this week, and I'm going to read the IMDb description, and Joe's going to tell you some of his notes.
Yeah.
On Game Night. This is a real quick one. IMDb description. A group of friends who meet regularly for game nights find themselves trying to solve a murder mystery.
Short and sweet.
Also inaccurate.
Yeah. All right. So.
Well, I guess not inaccurate, but it doesn't. The point of the movie is not that they're trying to solve a murder mystery. The point of the movie is that they think it's a murder mystery and it's something bigger.
Right.
Because in the real plot, there's no actual murder.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then in the game plot, even in the game plot, there's no actual murder. There's just an FBI agent.
Right. Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. All right. So Game Night is directed by John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. I guess they're writing partners / directing partners. Previously, they've directed Vacation, the one with Ed Helms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they were writing partners on Horrible Bosses, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2.
Meatballs.
What did I say?
Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Spaghetti and meatballs. Classic Italian dish.
They co-wrote Vacation, which they also directed, and they also worked on Spider-Man: Homecoming. But they did not write this.
They didn't?
No. This was written by Mark Perez,
Oh.
who wrote Frank McCluskey, C.I., The Country Bears, Herbie Fully Loaded, and Accepted. He has a strange writing.
Herbie Fully Loaded. Is that like the modern Herbie? Or
Yes.
He's not like some 70-year-old guy
No.
who wrote the original Herbie.
Yeah.
I could have sworn they wrote this. Especially, I guess I just assumed that when I saw that they directed it.
Right, because
And I was like, why would they not write it? Because they write together all the time.
They're writing partners, yeah.
And it seemed like their type of comedy. I mean, I guess they inserted their comedy through the direction, but it seemed like something that they would have written.
Right, yeah. No, it surprised me too.
Because we'll get into it, but I was surprised by how much I laughed during this movie. And I went into it not knowing that they had anything to do with it. And then I saw they directed it, assumed they wrote it in the credits at the end of the movie. And I was like, oh, that's why I laughed so much.
Right.
Because the hardest I laughed before this was probably Spider-Man: Homecoming that they did write.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, besides that, the Game Night stars Jason Bateman, Rachel McAdams, Bill Magnuson, Sharon Horgan, Lamorne Morris, Kylie Bunbury, Jesse Plemons, Michael C. Hall, and Kyle Chandler. Yeah. So that's about all there's no real standout information about. I mean, I have some quotes or whatever that I'll get into later. But yeah, I don't know. I'm like so cold all of a sudden. I'm just like, kind of like shivering a little. I don't know. I think our last review, we're doing Red Sparrow, and I think I was like, yeah, I'm into this vodka. And I think I was getting a little hot, and now I'm coming down off of that. And,
We need some more beer.
yeah.
So I thought that maybe we could start out talking about just the state of comedy, because I feel like that's so much of my context in reviewing this movie has to do with like comedy sucks. like what is good in comedy recently, and just being so surprised that I actually enjoyed a recent comedy that's out there.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, we have like this new algorithm where it's kind of like it's like all the trailers before this. It was like the cock blockers, which I don't think looks that bad. That kind of looks like sweet and funny.
Looks like a good trailer, but I can just tell it's going to be a bad movie.
Right. It looks like it could be Neighbors or Neighbor-ish or whatever. But I think, again, like Neighbors 2, all the comedies really come out in this period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes superhero time. And then there's summer blockbusters. And then I guess we get into like Oscar season kind of. And then rinse and repeat. So it is a little weird. And it is weird. I feel like we haven't reviewed a straight up comedy where, I mean, like there is like
there's a few we missed just based on the timing.
Yeah.
Like the most recently successful comedy was Girls Trip, which was actually wildly successful. Mm-hmm. Just the timing of it didn't work out for us reviewing Girls Trip.
Well, even Jumanji, and I mean, I guess there's like straight up comedies, and then there's action comedies, which I would almost place this gets very actiony at times, and I'll talk about that.
Yeah, although I don't think it's marketed like that.
Oh, definitely not.
And that's not really the selling point. There's action in it. But
Yeah. Yeah, it is, we are in a weird state of comedy. We went through this kind of golden age of these sort of Judd Apatow produced or directed films, and now we're, I don't know.
I wrote down a quote from him because I was like, am I crazy, or is comedy just in a bad place? And I Googled it, and
it doesn't seem marketable anymore. Or it doesn't seem
he did an interview about it, Judd Apatow himself, and he said, this is an interview with Vulture. He said, after the last writer's strike, it felt like the studios decided not to develop movies. They used to buy a lot of scripts, and they had big teams of people giving notes, and they worked for years with people in collaboration on those scripts. I feel like the studios don't buy as many scripts now. It used to be you'd open up Variety, and you'd see a movie studio had just bought a big high-concept comedy. Now it seems like they'd rather things come in packaged, a script, a cast, a director. As a result, now a lot of great comedy writers are going to television instead of sitting at home and trying to write a script for a film right the way that I was writing.
That makes a lot of sense.
And when you look at that through the lens of like, what are like the last few comedy films that have come out, like Jumanji, like, or Central Intelligence, or stuff like that, like that's obviously a package of like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in this scenario. A Jumanji reboot, and we're going to attach these actors to it, and then you write it based around those actors. And it doesn't seem like this sort of stood out in terms of, it seemed like it was a good concept where you could probably insert a bunch of different actors in these roles, and the concept is what makes it funny. There's no one in here that's like a huge draw. Like, there's no The Rock in here. There's no Kevin Hart. There's no Will Ferrell that's like, oh, I have to see it because he's in it. Like, is Jason Bateman... As much as I like Jason Bateman from Arrested Development, he's not drawing anyone to a movie because it's Jason Bateman in a movie. Maybe Rachel McAdams, but I don't know if she does that for comedy in the same way that she does for...
Jason Bateman is a pretty... I mean, it's weird because we are in this kind of in-between of comedies that could exist just because they're comedies, and these...
vehicles for people,
pole kind of comedies.
Yeah.
So that it is weird, and it is weird. I was gonna say something, totally forgot already.
Well, I think even when like the concept seems great, like the thing that sort of the lens that I'm viewing this through is like, I recently watched The House it was on Netflix or HBO or something. We saw it. It was a comedy from last year that I thought the trailer actually looked pretty good for. Like, I kind of wanted to see.
Not think that.
I kind of wanted to see. I thought it was a good concept of like, like suburban housewives and dads, like, sort of playing mafia for a while, and I thought there was a good sort of subplot in there, or like sub message in there of like, college is so expensive that people have to like resort to crime essentially to put their kids through college. And I thought that was a really smart concept. And then you put like someone like Jason Mantzoukas and Will Ferrell and Amy Poehler in there, and it seemed like a movie that could actually bring comedy back. Just because Will Ferrell has been a part of so many great comedies, and he is obviously such a brilliant comedic actor, even though he has not been in great movies recently. He's just kind of taking whatever he can get, it seems like, or just not caring what he takes. But The House was awful. And like, that was kind of me, like, sort of putting a nail in like the comedy coffin for a bit, where I was like, all right, like, they have to sort of invent a new way of comedy in order for comedy to work again. Because clearly things that we thought were going to work are not working in comedy. Actors that we thought would, sort of revive or, work in comedy are not really. Something is clearly wrong in comedy. And I feel like viewing this through that lens, maybe I'm a little more forgiving of it, although I still don't know what I would really totally criticize about this movie, because I think it's still just a pretty solid movie. But I definitely have to be honest, it elevates this movie coming out in this time period where what else is really funny besides like, I feel like superhero movies like end up being like the comedies of our time now. Well, like where like Thor Ragnarok is like one of the funnier movies in recent memory, or Spider-Man Homecoming, and like, but these are not meant to be comedies. They just happen to have funny people attached to them. And like Judd Apatow says, a lot of the comedy that's going on right now from great comedy writers is on TV, like Veep and Silicon Valley, and a lot of other comedies like that are some of the hardest laughs I've had in the past like 5 years hasn't
Right.
really come from movies at all.
Yeah. It's strange. It's strange to kind of try and get data from where you've been receiving laughs recently. Which I was going to say, I mean, there used to be like X amount of like very funny comedies, like a year kind of. And now we kind of have, like, I mean, like, let's look at last year. Like, Get Out was funny. That was about like 10% comedy, I think, that movie. Lady Bird was funny.
Lady Bird was the funniest movie from last year.
Yeah, it was a funny movie.
Well, it was Girls Trip last year. I haven't seen
Girls Trip was last year.
I've heard such great things, though. It's on my list
to
check out.
That's
Did you see Girls Trip?
No, I didn't. That's one of my biggest regrets is not reviewing that on here. But is Trivia HQ.
Do you have a timer set for that, too?
No, but I just know it's time. I feel like I have like an internal clock now of when Trivia HQ comes. Yeah. It's like waking up for, but yeah, it's strange where we're trying to quantify like where laughs are like coming from, where it is like two of my biggest laughs recently have been from like, I think I was sending it to a lot of group chats that you were in, but like the most recent like Lil Dicky video, like I was just like, that's funny. And then also like Lonely Island's kind of like failed pitch for the opening musical number of Oscars, like that was like really funny. And we have all these like really funny comedic voices and we don't know quite where to place them.
Yeah.
So they kind of only exist on like YouTube, where they're able to kind of dodge like, oh, is this marketable or not? I don't know. To be fair, still one of the hardest times I've like laughed out loud in theaters was like Daddy's Home 2.
I didn't hear to say that.
The end, just the end where like it can completely embrace absurdity and it turns into some sort of musical number and everything's coming together. I will still not let go of. I really laughed out loud to
That's
myself.
That's what I point to as the comedy is dead.
In an empty theater. I don't laugh out loud really that much in theaters, but I like bellowed a laugh. Like
I laughed out loud so much during this, and I think that's because I feel like we've seen movies that have been like even like Lady Bird. Like I thought Lady Bird was very funny, and I loved Lady Bird for other reasons. But the comedy in it was just kind of like chuckle laughter, you know?
Right.
Whereas like this, they were like, it was the type of comedy where, I guess I shouldn't say Lego Batman movie last year.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Was probably the, I completely forgot about that being a comedy. There were, because we talked about that, where in Lego Batman movie, I was laughing so hard I was missing other jokes in Lego Batman movie. So I guess that's a good, but again, I guess my point being that like adult comedy, like, you know, we used to have like Anchorman and, you know, Blades of Glory and like this whole sort of like Judd Apatow, Will Ferrell, like glory days of comedy, or even like, you know, like when Ben Stiller was like a big name in comedy and like Zoolander. And like, I remember going to see, what was the movie? Him and Mila Ackerman. It was a Heartbreak Kid or something. I remember that having like a lot of like full belly laughs in that, despite being like, by most standards, a pretty mediocre comedy movie. Like, I just feel like whoever is writing the comedy movies or whoever they're buying the comedy scripts from are not really sure how to actually make people laugh these days.
And there's also very, very little
comedies actually being made.
Yeah. No, that sucks because we also have because we could potentially have like this kind of like Next Time on Lonnie, who Ben Stiller kind of like took under his wing, and then they made Big Time in Hollywood. And the next logical step would be to put out like a film, like in theaters, kind of.
Couldn't even do a second season of Lonnie.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Hollywood.
And nobody's just really that interested in that kind of comedy anymore. Kind of, it's.
But I feel like they don't know that. It was like we shed off the old era of comedy without knowing where we were going next. And I bring this up all the time. I feel like it has something to do with memes and like internet humor, where like I feel like we don't know how to put that into a movie. And I feel like we end up getting stuff like the part that made me cringe in like Black Panther of like her like Letitia Wright, that his sister being like, what are those? And like that's like our punchline now is just a reference to like a modern meme and stuff like that. And anyway, we should transition into talking about why game night actually works,
right,
now that we've set enough of the context.
Right. It's humor is...
I think it's a fantastic concept for a movie.
Well, I mean, I'm so glad that we have a monster of the week kind of sense of humor that's so universal that is memes. I don't want to downplay memes at all.
No, but how does that affect movies?
But yeah, no, marketing teams look at that like, fuck, we could put all of this in a script tomorrow, shoot it in like a few days and put it out or whatever, and like we'd be like a year late, kind of. You know, it's people, they don't know how to profit off of humor surrounding pop culture anymore. It's just kind of like Family Guy or The Simpsons. It completely annihilated that after a while, because it was kind of like memes are too quick, man. It's like they're there one day, and then like your parents are sharing
even
them
like
SNL,
7 days
like
later. SNL
yes.
like once a week is oftentimes late on the jokes about
Yes.
political stuff, because Twitter's already beat it to death, and they're like saying stuff that like, even if they're not directly stealing a joke, we got that punchline from like a bunch of other nobodies on Twitter already that got retweeted a million times.
I mean, there's something kind of where what are their names? The Trey Parker and
Matt
Stone, who kind of made that documentary, who are kind of like I don't know, where they make like literally South Park episodes in a few days, right before the episode airs. And it's kind of, there's something genius to that, where they're almost ahead of their time at that time, because like they almost foresaw how comedy was going. Not that South Park is a great success now because of that, but
I do think people still enjoy. I feel like we just fell out of touch with South Park, but I hear a lot of people talking about how it's been like better than ever. Recently, which I can imagine.
Good.
The material is there.
Oh, right.
I just haven't kept up with it.
No, and I mean, the writing and the style of animation that they have, I'm so glad that they can have a quick turnaround, because like nothing was more mind-blowing than like first discovering that it takes 6 months to like make a Simpsons episode. Like that's so soul-crushing. That's kind of like, well, then what's the point, man? Like that. But yeah, let's fucking talk about game night.
So, I guess if we want to start big and go in small, like my first like overall impression of the movie is that I feel like they really took their time with like the visuals and like the aesthetic of this movie. Like just right from the get-go, like they have like the like 3D animated like pieces falling.
Oh yeah.
With this like kind of pretty cool like sort of dubsteppy like EDM type track playing.
Okay.
It was just very strange for like a comedy. Like I feel like usually comedies are not trying to tilt modern in their aesthetic. You know, it's usually some sort of like like dumpy like score playing in the background,
or it cuts right into it.
Yeah, or they don't even think about it. And I think that's maybe more what I was taken aback by, is that like so many comedies that get put out, they barely even think about like what is like the aesthetic of our humor, much less what is our actual like aesthetic for this movie. And it just ends up feeling like no one really cares about the movies that they're putting out. Like it's just kind of like a comedy is a cheap, easy movie to make that we can attach a bunch of comedic actors that we'll draw to, and we can spend like 15, 20 million on it, and we can make like 50 million over a couple of weeks. Yeah. And like it's just an easy return, I feel like, for a lot of studios. And like I think of like The House, which like there's just not really an aesthetic to it. It's like all over the place, and they have all these people in it that like House probably made its money back.
Right.
I'm sure. I don't think it was a huge success, but I don't think they're looking at comedies that way either when they're putting them out. They're just kind of, it feels half-assed. My point being that like just right from the beginning of this movie and then throughout it, it felt like someone cared about this movie and that took me by surprise in a comedy.
On the other hand, I really enjoyed like these sort of, although dated at this point, and again, because we live in a fucking warp speed pop culture society, I really enjoyed the tilt shift kind of effect on like a lot of the establishing shots of the neighborhoods that
I
made
felt
them
like
look like
it felt like
Monopoly
made sense for
houses
this movie.
or
Yeah,
whatever.
If it looked like
But
toy pieces.
it wasn't really. I kind of like wish they continued that into, because we start in suburban America and we kind of like work our way into more urban America kind of, and I wish we continued to I wish there was like a consistent, like, it's kind of like how we talk about narration. Like, I kind of wish it ended like that, or we had some of that more later in the movie, kind of, where it was kind of more of a sales pitch at the beginning, and kind of they were like, fuck it, like, kind of waved it off near the end.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as the action was ramping up, which I get, but like, I could have used some of that.
Yeah, although I mean, I feel like they did find opportunities to just do different stuff. Like there was one thing where maybe it was in a car chase where they clearly had like a car like camera mounted on the top of a car.
Yeah,
and like they just did a bunch of different stuff where like another comedy wouldn't have thought to do that. And it's not that like that specific shot like made the movie, but it was just the feeling that like someone wasn't looking at this as just like another paycheck, and someone was like, we can do some cool stuff here. Like,
yes.
Just because it's a comedy doesn't mean it has to be like some throwaway, like, okay, let's just point the camera at Will Ferrell and he'll make magic happen. Like, they were trying to do their part on all aspects of this movie, it felt like, from like the VFX people, which is weird to say for a comedy movie, but like, you know, when they have like the pieces falling and stuff like that, or just the color grading in this movie, the cinematography, like, it's not like it's telling an amazing story through the cinematography, but it just looks good. And it was just nice to feel like somebody cared about this movie. And it made me, from the beginning, just be like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm more invested in this movie because it's not just a throwaway thing. I also felt like it might have had something to do with them thinking the target audience for this movie was like stoners.
Oh, really?
Just the way the music was, like, it was a weird music choice for a comedy. Like, I liked it, but it was like, it was very young of a music choice. I felt like the EDM, and like they kind of had like a game night like theme song sort of that they kept playing. That was like this like glitchy dubstep EDM type thing. And I feel like that had I mean, I'm a little biased because my theater like reeked of weed when I was in it. So. But I mean, there was a bunch of people who were clearly high in my theater, and they very much enjoyed the movie. And I kind of felt like, oh, like maybe they had some data that was like, oh, that's our target audience, is like,
oh yeah,
who goes to see comedies now as people who are high.
I mean, if you're high, why would you want to go see anything else besides a comedy?
Yeah,
I think.
Anything else would be too stressful.
Oh no! I mean, even something that's like purely intellectual, like, I would not want to engage in as a high person. I mean, my God, imagine seeing Red Sparrow high. Like, I would be. That sounds like sober me. That was like nightmare mode. But no, yeah, definitely. It almost makes me sad that we're probably just not going to find the time to review like Super Troopers 2, because that was such a I don't know. That was very part of my developmental kind of.
I feel like that was like sleepover era of like comedy.
Yeah. No. Weird story. This guy who kind of ended up being like this sexual sociopath person who was like a peer in like one of my karate classes. Nick knows this kid. Kind of like gaslighted me into being like, oh yeah, like we should go see a movie, and kind of like convinced like me to like convince my dad to go and take us to go see Super Troopers, because it was like a R-rated movie, and it was like very adult content for like the age that I was at that time, kind of. And I saw it and I was just kind of like, whoa. I didn't realize like this was like early in middle school or late in elementary school is when Super Troopers came out. So I was like really like it was a big shock to see a comedy like that, especially because I don't know, but I loved it because it was wild and it was crazy and it was drug infused and there was sex and everything. It was just like a really great comedy. I would love to revisit what looks like a terrible sequel, but but no, let's talk more about this movie again. Painting with broader strokes. I've heard a lot of complaints about this movie that it was front-loaded, kind of, with jokes, and I didn't completely agree with that.
Not at all. I think the middle's the best part.
Here's what I think. I mean, maybe spoiler alert. I mean, maybe people have already watched it. It's hard to tell what's a spoiler and what's not in this movie. But or maybe I'll just work my way up to it. Another complaint I've heard is people don't like the kind of baby stuff, the infertility stuff. I really like that. That's a plot point that drives this movie.
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff that's like sort of cheesy or gimmicky in this movie.
Seems like a studio no. That's believable for me, but it also seems like the entire premise and what drives this movie.
I mean, I think it gives us something to sort of care about these characters. It gives us growth for both of the characters in this. And I think without that, it's just a weird, like, situational comedy that, like, I doesn't matter.
I don't think the studio was like, I don't think we can believe that Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams are in love without, like, kind of some sort of baby thing. You know? Like, I don't think that. Like, I think that it works very well with the plot.
I don't know if I agree with it being a studio note, but to anyone who's criticizing it, I think it is one of the better parts of this script. Because it ends up being sort of there's some very nice, like, bookends in this movie that, they're a little simple. They're a little, like, there's nothing that's, like, blowing my mind from the writing perspective.
Right.
Which is, again, why I tried to so carefully lay out, like, the landscape of comedy recently, that, like, viewing it through that lens, I was just kind of like a person who, like, has actually read Sid Field's, like, screenwriting book, like, wrote this comedy and wasn't just like, but what if they went to this place and did this thing? Like, it didn't feel like a collection of set pieces, which is what most comedies feel like now. And this, like, it is situational, but we understand why they're in this situation. It's well established. And it's kind of like the whole movie is the situation that we're allowed. It's the sandbox that we're allowed to play in. Like, the movie I compare this the most to is, I think it's from the 90s. I saw it well after it came out, but it's a Bill Murray comedy called The Man Who Knew Too Little.
Yes.
It's basically a spoof of The Man Who Knew Too Much, where he's in this, his brother signs him up for this thing that's like an interactive, like, spy acting thing, sort of like what they're in now, where like he thinks he's in like an action movie type thing, and you're supposed to play along, and it turns out he's actually in this like like Russian like mob type thing that so like he's shooting a gun and he thinks it's a fake, and he's like, wow, the special effects are like great, and it's actually like a real gun, and the Russian mob is like, oh, like he's fearless, like he's fighting off all our best guys, and because he thinks that it's all special effects, and like that's a really great premise. And this is sort of along the same lines of that, where like I really love the scene where they go to the bar and they're playing around with the gun, and like Rachel McAdams is being like sort of like badass because she thinks that it's a fake gun, and she's just playing along and like not realizing that like it's a real gun she's waving around. Like, I think humor like that is great, and they create this situation that like they can create smaller situations and scenarios in, without just being set piece. Like when you create something that works overarchingly, and then you can kind of work within that, I think that's great. And then you give us a personal motivation for all these characters too. Like, not only do we have that they are trying to make this baby, like that's sort of like a subplot that sort of gives us a nice bookend at the end, so it's a happy ending, for more than one reason. But the main motivation being that like Max is his whole sort of life has been driven by this competition with Brooks, and the movie is sort of revolving around Brooks coming back to town, and Max and his wife now realizing how competitive they are and sort of wanting to one up Brooks, and they're going to take it like to the next level in this competition that Brooks is trying to put them through with the murder mystery thing.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. Again, to speak about the movie more as a whole, I really like what we have going between Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams in this kind of pregnancy doctor office or whatever. To see
It does tie into the main storyline too, of him being
definitely to see them in their home in private or whatever and talking about this, because I start to like it less actually near the middle, when it becomes more action driven and there's kind of car chase stuff. And then I actually don't like that bar scene where it feels like they're like jerking off like Chekhov's gun, like, like where it's kind of like it's I don't know, maybe
there's so many little moments in that scene that I love.
but there's maybe, and again, I think this is purely my personal taste, kind of, where I just want to like laugh the whole time, and I don't want to be, maybe like, that scene's maybe a little more thrilling, and I think that scene's like almost like maybe even a little more like horror-esque, kind of, because there is a person playing with a loaded gun who thinks it's not a real gun.
See, I think that scene's funny. I think when it switches, it ends up sort of turning into not horror, but like it's a real 180. I don't know. My theater
like
was
thriller.
Theater was definitely laughing the hardest during that scene. Just, I mean, the whole like Rachel McAdams, like she's like trying to be a badass, but like she's not even like really committing to it. She's just kind of like half-assed, like, yeah, get on the fucking ground. Like she doesn't really even buy it herself. And then like Jason Bateman, when he holds the gun, he's just kind of like, he's not even holding it correctly. And he's like, yeah, like get down, like I've got a loaded gun. There's a lot of little stuff, like when she's pointing the gun at like all the people's heads, the bartender just like looks down and like can't look up, because like he's not involved in any of it. He's not even in on like the later thing. I mean, we'll get into it with spoilers later. There's a whole other subplot going on. He's not in on that. He's just a bartender who's getting held up at that point. Or like she points it at the one of the other guys at one point, and he's just kind of like, Jesus Christ. It's just going too far. There's a lot in it that I think that really works. And then when it switches, when she actually fires the gun and it ricochets and it goes through Jason Bateman's arm, that's like a kind of like almost like horror scene like twist, where he's like, blood, like, oh my god, like this is real. We were playing around before, and now there's like an actual bullet through my arm.
I do like, I mean, again, personal taste, I do like that this movie is kind of like, there's a hole in the main character's arm, and he's never really going to lose enough blood to like pass out, or what would like what would really happen. And I almost wish Kyle Chandler's character was like a little more just like extreme, like maybe like Will Arnett's character in like Hot Rod, where he's like too show-offy. Like the only scene that we really get is when he pulls up in like the dream car or whatever, and he's blasting something ridiculous. I don't even know what it is, like some sort of like Billy Joel song or something. Like it's just dumb. I wish, and again, we later discover that he's even more of a ridiculous character than we expect. I wish he was more. There's so much build up to this character, and I wish he was more standoffish or show offish.
Yeah, as much as I like Kyle Chandler, I don't think he's the best casting for that role, particularly because he's not very funny in this movie.
Well, I actually really like Kyle Chandler. I wish it was better written. I think. I wish it was better written.
I think he plays what's written very well, but I think we could have cast someone better. Like, I don't think he underperforms what's there. But I feel like you could have written someone better. You could have written someone more ridiculous, and then also cast someone who's going to really play up that ridiculousness. Like, I think he didn't play it as funny as that role could have been. Like, he's not really a source of comedy in this movie at all. He's kind of like a source of like, there's a few moments where he kind of like touches your heart with like his change of heart at certain times in this movie, and he's really showing like more like dramatic chops in this like comedy, and it doesn't really hurt the movie, but it is a source where like, oh, that could have like really punched this movie up, you know. Yeah. But there's also so many other great comedic actors really holding their own in this movie.
But I don't know. I do think it is this sort of complication of maybe bad writing. Like, I also really like Billy
Magnuson.
Yeah, Magnuson in this movie, and I think he's like a really, like, again, when
He's gonna blow the fuck up.
when the writing's really great for him, he gets like a ton of laughs. But then he kind of like, it goes from, he shows up to game night kind of with like all these like random Tinder dates who like all look the same, who all act the same, who are kind of these ditzy kind of girls or whatever. But there's so much more of a fleshed out character of him, and it's so much more of a revealing scene where they're kind of like, if you keep bringing these girls, you're never gonna win game night. And he's like, well, I don't feel so poorly about myself that
He doesn't have a competitive nature, and he's like, I don't care.
Right. He's like, honestly, like,
I just like hanging out with you guys.
This, like, instead of taking these girls on a date, I get to like hang out with like my best friends in the world, and then I get to go take these girls home and have sex with them. Like, what's better than that, guys? Like, kind of like, it's like, I don't feel so insecure that I need to, prove myself to my two friends, kind of. And I thought that was like, a really funny premise for a character, but instead of kind of showing this like anti-American dream kind of character who's like, I don't need the fucking house. They kind of like Taco in like The League kind of, where you can gain a lot of humor through that. Who's like, oh, that's funny. This guy just needs the simple things and he just wants to have like sex kind of. But instead they kind of like revert back into like, he's so stupid he doesn't know this kind of. Like they go like very hard into stupid humor a lot of the time for him. Like, I really didn't like the scene where he like slides the 10, 5, and 2 $1 bills across the table. I was like,
it is a little extreme.
It's like
it got big laughs in my theater though.
It didn't get any laughs in my theater, and the fact that he does like 3 more bills, like, just like started twisting the knife. Like, for me, I was just kind of like, okay.
I don't know if that's as much stupid as much as that fits into like, it's these people who they don't realize that they're in this like bigger plot, and they're sort of like they're trying to play this like part of like a serious like they're sort of spoofing on like action movies. It's similar to like Rachel McAdams being like, everyone get on the ground now, and like this is his version of like, oh, like I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. And the comedy is obviously that it's a smaller bill and he doesn't have a lot of cash on him. And I don't think it was as much stupid as it was just kind of the situation of like, they're sort of like playing into this, like it's a bigger situation than they realize, and they're having fun with it. They don't realize that it's a real deal going on.
I just want to close up like this thought of this section or whatever. Is I think this movie is not as funny when we separate everybody into couples. When we have the entire ensemble cast, I think it's very funny. But I think Jason Bateman and Rachel McAdams kind of pursuing this game is not funny. I think that whole scene with the dollar bills or whatever is not funny. The scene with, I think Lamorne Morris is one of the funniest people working in comedy today. He's in New Girl guy? Yeah. And his
Denzel impression is so funny.
It is. It's really good. I think he's just one of the funniest people. But anyway, when they put them in the pairs, I was like, I'm not a fan of this movie. And then they bring it back, and that's why I disagree with the whole like, this comedy is front loaded with jokes. Is because when I think they get back into a group,
when they go to they go to Jesse Plemons' house with like, hey, let's just stall for a moment just to,
or even like the Fight Club house, like I was just
that was like, great too, yeah. But let's just gush over how Jesse Plemons is the best part of this movie.
Oh, definitely.
All of my like full belly gut laughs were just like his little like one-liners. There's so many of them that like they're not even really punchlines. It's such a great delivery of everything he's saying. Like, I think I was kind of hesitant going into this movie because of my view of comedy recently, and then I don't think the movie really drags you in it kind of takes a while to be like, not a while, but like there's a bit in the beginning where you're like, especially because it starts out so cheesy with like they're meeting at trivia night over both having the right answer to a trivia question. He's proposing via like charades, where in the beginning I was kind of like, okay, like where's it going with this? It wins you over in the end. Where in the end I'm like, hell yeah, like you better reveal that she's pregnant via Pictionary. Like it works in the end. You've kind of bought into it by then.
I bought in almost immediately to that kind of like cutesy. Maybe I just have a thing for like montages and music involved and everything. I was kind of like, maybe the DDR at their wedding was kind of like,
that was a little
I don't really understand what's competitive about this kind of, but I also didn't like that they don't introduce any of these kind of main characters in any of those sequences. They just
that was an opportunity to do that,
right? They just kind of have that.
They just show up at game night.
That they have that one comedian, glasses, heavier set white guy who...
Yeah, he's like their friend throughout those scenes.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, I was waiting for him to show back up, kind of.
And he's not there yet.
Right, yeah. He was just kind of like we filmed this after we filmed the movie, so...
Yeah.
No.
But when they first encounter Jesse Plemons as the cop outside of their house, and he's kind of like interrogating them about having game night that night, and the one line where he's like, "Oh, I see you've got 3 bags of Tostitos scoops there," and they're kind of like trying to play it off as like, "Oh yeah, like it was 3 for 1," and he's like, "How is that profitable for Frito-Lay?"
I love this character because he never has to like wink to the camera either.
Yeah.
It's just he's in his own space, like really.
I think Jesse Plemons is one of my favorite actors that's working right now. Mm-hmm. Like everything that I've seen him in recently, like he was really good. I don't know if you watched the new season of Black Mirror.
Oh yes, in the
Star Trek sort of episode. He's really great in that. Mm-hmm. And then obviously on like Breaking Bad, and then what was it, Other People, or is that what it's called? What's the...
Oh, yes. The one with Molly Shannon.
Is it Other People?
I believe so. I'm not really sure, though.
Yeah, he's the star of that dramedy with Molly Shannon and Zach Woods. And
the one with Vince?
Vince?
our friend Vince.
For some reason, thought you were making an Entourage reference.
Oh, no.
It's like, Adrian Grenier was not in that.
He's home for a wedding over this summer. I was like, Vince, come on the podcast. We can talk about you being in Other People.
One of our friends, Vince, was at, I guess they filmed a scene at UCB.
Right, yeah.
And he's in the audience there for like a reaction shot.
He's like direct center where I was just like watching it on like my iPhone, kind of like laying in bed, and I was like, is that Vince? Like I never noticed, like I think Vince has had like a lot of extra parts, but like this one was like very...
It was Vince. Yeah. But yeah, just he I think I'll if you take Jesse Plemons' plot and character and his acting out of this movie, it's a much less funny movie, in my opinion. He sort of carries a lot of like the really hard laughs in this movie. And then just his whole, in terms of the plot, like I think the middle is so good is because when they go to his house and they're all together, and it's like there's so many things that are like coinciding to work, where it's like the whole like Gary and like Debbie sort of plot of like him being obsessed with his ex-wife that left. There's like him and like his dog, and then like Jason Bateman has like the blood through his arm, so like all that like coincides with like the blood like getting on the carpet. That's like a really fun like physical comedy sequence of like him trying to clean up the blood, it getting on the dog, him trying to clean up the dog gets even more bloody, and then he ends up splattering it like all over like Debbie's like shrine in that room.
It's very like Meet the Fockers.
It's great. Like it's one of those things where you're like cringing, where you're like, no, like how could this get any worse? And it just keeps like going and going, and it's like got the added like suspense of like they're all in the next room, like thinking that he's in the bathroom. I think that was clearly like the best sequence of this movie. That and like them being at the like the house, the reveal of like there actually being a fight club after like him talking about there being a fight club the entire time.
Again, like that guy can deliver really great lines. Yeah. Also, I mean, again, while we're talking about that kind of scene, just Jason Bateman, like, I love his style of comedy where there's pause before like every joke. He nails every line. Um, Something that I did think was kind of goofy. Some of the casting was good, where it's kind of like Kyle Chandler is like 2 or 3 years older than Jason Bateman, who's like 50, and then Rachel McAdams is like 40, I think. But then like the rest of the cast is kind of like half Jason Bateman's age.
He does look young, though. He can play young. I think he's supposed to be playing younger.
He is, but I think there are.
I don't think he's a 50-year-old guy who's been dragging his feet about having a kid at that point.
Right.
I think he's supposed to be like late 30s, maybe early 40s at most.
But there's scenes where you can kind of see his face, and you can kind of see like the aging in his face, or I'm kind of like, oh man, like it looks like
hanging out with some young people. Billy Magnuson looks very young.
Right. No, it looks like kind of like if you were to. It kind of looks like if you were.
I wish they would have explained why they were all friends.
Exactly.
Some kind of common link. Because especially when you have like Billy Magnuson, he's like, I'm not competitive. Yeah. I just like hanging out with you guys. Yes. Like, well, then where did you meet?
Right. It feels more like a sitcom kind of that has a more lengthy kind of like, oh, well, this is how he came into the group, kind of like a more unlikely gathering of like kind of like, how did everybody from How I Met Your Mother meet, or Friends, or but yeah, it was a little weird just because I think there's like one like kind of like line that's like, oh yeah, I know like Jason Bateman from work, kind of. But then later, Billy and Lamorne, I don't know their actual characters' names, reference like Kyle Chandler as kind of like, oh yeah, he's always been cool. Like he's always been the cooler. Like it almost like
sounds like childhood friends.
Implies, yeah. Right? Yeah, exactly. When these guys would be graduating from high school and Jason Bateman would be 40.
Well, I guess if they were his friends, they do talk. I mean, even though they don't show him in the wedding sequence, they do talk about Kyle doing stuff for Max's wedding.
The wedding, yes.
Yeah, like the toast he gave and whatnot.
Right.
So they must have been at the. They must have been friends before that. They might have known. They were probably in. This is a lot of posturing for writing that should have been done in the movie. But also doesn't totally matter. Like, yeah, if we wanted to make this a 5-finger movie, then you could maybe tie up some of those loose ends. But
you were talking about the dog and the blood scene is your favorite scene. I think definitely my favorite scene. And I'll preface this with an interview I was reading with John Francis Daly. The whole thing.
Oh, Sam Weir.
Oh yes, Sam Weir. The whole thing with Lamorne Morris like interrogating his girlfriend about like the celebrity crush, like the whole like Denzel doubles scene was actually a studio note that wasn't in the original script. And I was
what was their subplot?
I was like, what the fuck? They were like, oh yeah, it just kind of ended with her like admitting it to him, and I was like, what? How is that part of a comedy script? I was so confused. I was just kind of like, what?
So the celebrity thing was in there, but not the sequence of
right. Yeah, the flashback.
Showing. Oh, okay.
Yes, yeah. Which was kind of like, I thought that was the whole payoff. Like that scene was literally my favorite. Like the like that matched with the Drake song and kind of.
What was it? What was the Drake song? Was it?
Coming Home or I don't know exactly what that
I know what you're talking about. I can't remember what the actual title of that song is.
I think it's Coming Home.
Just hold on, we're going home.
Hold on, we're going home.
Yeah.
But
hold on, we're coming home.
We're coming home. So when your kids are scared and you're like, just hold on, we're coming home. But that like sort of the flash, I used to fucking hate flashbacks in movies, and all of a sudden I've really like grown. Like, I know it's a completely different movie, but Good Time, like that movie really ties together really well with that kind of like they go to like White Castle or McDonald's or whatever the fuck, and it's one of the slowest points in the movie, but that flashback, which is fucking crazy, is like, it really keeps the adrenaline going of what's an adrenaline-driven movie. Flashback works so well. It's one of my favorite scenes in this movie. And then in this movie, the excitement's kind of low, and then I really love how this kicks in, and like, not even excitement, laughs have kind of been low for like a little bit, and then this kicks in. Like, I honestly, any other movie, and maybe this is to a fault, and maybe this is also to credit the movie, but any other movie would have been like, oh, like, I had sex with a celebrity. It was Denzel Washington. In the end of the movie, Denzel Washington's going to be like, hey, I'm going to save you guys. And then also, I can't stop thinking about our hookup.
Yeah.
I think we were meant to be together. And then she's like, I'm sorry, but I've known him since we were kids, and this is my true love. Like, that can't overcome attraction and celebrity, kind of. And like, wow, what a meaningful scene. But in this, it's just kind of like out of right field. It's kind of like, this flashback is, she meets this Denzel Washington like double, essentially. And they get drinks, and they dance, and they have sex. And then she's like, I even have a selfie to prove it, kind of. And they like look at it, and it's very obviously not Denzel Washington.
It's funny because in the flashback, I remember being like, that's not Denzel. They've either like stitched his face on there or something, and then like you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's not meant to be Denzel.
And just when Lamorne is like zooming into the guy's nose, he's like, the nose is really what gives it away, kind of. It's like really goofy, and that's a really great punchline. I can't believe that wasn't in the
I
script
do wish
yet.
they tied. I love that flashback sequence. I think that's good for great laughs in this movie. But I do wish they tied that up nicer, because it was like that was their entire plot in this movie was during Never Have I Ever, that coming up and him being sort of obsessed with that. And I thought they were going to sort of come out with some sort of, not that I need like a message, but like some sort of resolution about jealousy where like, yeah, I did sleep with whoever or whatnot, but like, you're obviously the person that I care about. You're the person I'm meant to be with. And it was going to be some sort of growth for his character, being able to overcome his sort of like obsession with who did you sleep with? Who did you sleep with? And it ended up just being like, it wasn't really a resolution because it ended up being that she didn't sleep with a celebrity, and that's why he was okay with it. But like, had she slept with a celebrity, would he be okay with it? And it felt like a distraction rather than a resolution to that plot line.
That whole
it is a subplot, so I don't really care. But again, if we're looking at this through the lens of what would make this a five-finger movie, that was something that I felt was lacking.
That whole plot line was incredibly confusing. Because as they're building towards like the skylight, when they're trapped in the room, he says, if I guess what celebrity this is, will you tell me? And she's like, yeah. And then the second guess is Denzel, and she's like, no. And then he's doing like the whole Denzel monologue, kind of. And then she comes back and she's like, it was Denzel. And I was kind of like, what? And then like, again,
like that would make more sense if it did turn into this actual problem and that they had to resolve. Where she was like, yeah, I didn't want to tell you because I knew you would freak out like you're freaking out now. Like, even like separate those two. Like, have them like break up for a short moment. Yeah. And then in some sort of heroic moment, they have to come back together, and he realizes like, I don't care if you slept with like Tom Cruise and Denzel and like everybody. Like, I love you for who you are. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that would have been a better resolution than like, even though I do, again, I like that individual sequence and flashback of like, oh, that's not Denzel, baby. Like, you slept with like a middle class dude with a BMW.
Where did he live? Well, he had a two-bedroom apartment that he used the second bedroom as an office. Baby, that's not Denzel. But no, it like, I mean, as I described the more cliched ending, that makes more sense. Where Denzel like shows up with a gun and shoots somebody, and to comedic effect goes like, baby, I haven't stopped thinking about you, kind of. Like
an actual Denzel cameo. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That has more of an emotional pull than like this whole weird...
It's better for the movie as a whole, but for that individual laugh, that sequence is great.
Yeah. but yeah, it's a weird kind of, I don't know. I feel like I've been conditioned to believe that a celebrity was going to show up in this movie. Like, it was kind of like, that's been a recent addition of celebrity movies, like in Dodgeball, when Chuck Norris has like that rating at the end, or still one of my favorites is in You Me and Dupree.
Lance, I've seen that.
Oh, Lance Armstrong kind of shows up. It's funny, yeah.
Well, he's in Lance Armstrong is in Dodgeball too.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
What does he say? Where he's like, yeah, well, he says something where he makes Vince Vaughn feel guilty about like giving up. I think it was before Lance Armstrong was disgraced by the steroids thing.
Yeah. But this is one of my last points about this movie, is to revisit the.
Just to cut you off real quick, not that it was a celebrity cameo, but Michael C. Hall showing up was like a surprise cameo. That was He's not in the advertising at all, and I actually really liked him in this role. And I remember thinking while watching it, like, oh, why is he not in more stuff? And then I was like, oh, because he's got leukemia and he's fighting that all the time.
Yeah, is he still fighting that?
I feel like he's in and out of remission. Where like there was a while where it was like Michael C. Hall beat leukemia, he's back in Dexter, and then it was like, oh, like I can only assume it's either that or like having leukemia makes Michael C. Hall being like, why do I need to act all the time? Like, I should spend more time with my family or something. So either way, it's an acceptable response to a life-threatening illness. But he was great in this. I'm
sure he got hella paycheck for this.
Yeah. But I haven't seen
I'm sure he wasn't driven by the script.
Yeah. But he's kind of good in like this sort of like fully villainous role, but like a comedic villainous role, I guess is what I mean. Like the sort of the punchline of like Kyle Chandler like swallowing the, I want to refer to it as like the knock list, because that's what it feels like from like Mission Impossible, the witness protection list, and him being like, well, now you can't get it out of me, or unless you're gonna have to wait until I like shit it out. And he's like, no, that's gross. Like, we're gonna cut it out of your like intestine.
He's like, oh, we're just gonna cut it out on the jet. Yeah.
I'm gonna wait till you shit. Ew.
I don't know. I really liked Kyle Chandler in this movie. I kind of like, it was just like a refreshing kind of casting idea.
It grounded it a little bit, because he's very real in this. Like, again, they could have gone a different way to get laughs. They could have put someone wild and zany.
But I think he could pull that off, though. I feel like with the right writing, the right editing, and everything, like, I feel like, again, he's kind of like just a kind of prisoner of whatever's being written for him is what he does, kind of. I don't know. Because I do think he looks like it's really well casting. He does look like this older, more handsome Jason Bateman kind of. I think the first time I was introduced to Kyle Chandler was in like Peter Jackson's like King Kong, where he's supposed to be like this early 1900s like movie star, which is what he looks like, kind of. I was even like listening to some podcast where I guess one of his biggest roles is definitely like as the coach in like Friday Night Lights or whatever, and maybe whatever he did before that, he was kind of like this like pretty boy kind of, and the creator of Friday Night Lights, or like showrunner, was kind of like, or the studio or television station was kind of like, we want like Kyle Chandler, like he's a really great actor, and like he's very handsome. Obviously the women are going to like tune in for him, kind of. And the showrunner was kind of like, that's not what I want, really. Like, I'll take a meeting with him. So they meet at like a diner, and the showrunner's just kind of like sitting there in like a diner booth, and Kyle Chandler like pulls up in like a fucking like Harley Davidson, and it looks like he hasn't like shaved in like days, and it looks like he hasn't like slept in days, and he like sits down and he smells of fucking like smoke and booze, and he's like, hey, I'm sorry, I know this is really unprofessional, but I've been playing like poker with my buddies for the past few days, and I haven't really slept. honestly. Like, that's just how long we've been playing poker. And then the creator of Friday Night Lights was like, okay, can we use this, but in like the role that I want you to be? He was just kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah. And it was just like a funny story of just, he happened to look like shit.
Win the role by being a piece of shit.
Right, yeah. Uh-huh.
He was great in Manchester by the Sea, too.
Oh, yeah. But he's also at the turn where he's not really like this kind of Wall Street guy. He's more so this like black market criminal.
Mm-hmm.
That's believable. Like, you can look at him again in the same exact light and be like, oh, okay, like I could see him as Wall Street, but now I can also see him as like gritty and fucked up kind of. I think it was like really good casting. Yeah. But yeah.
I guess maybe really like let's just talk about like the ending real quick before ratings. I'm trying to remember it in my head because I remember there was a bit of like a twist, and they were kind of like cognizant of that too, because there's some line at some point with Jason Bateman. He says something that's kind of like almost like meta, like oh now this is happening, like
right. So they meet up to bring the egg with the kind of hit list to these two like criminal henchmen,
the people who had kidnapped Kyle Chandler before,
and
then they're playing out the whole scenario of like, oh, you, I do love one of the other biggest laughs was like with like Jason Bateman. He says something like, no, like I think we're gonna be fine, and then like on the phone he's like, oh, all right, you want me to kill them all?
Yeah.
That like reversal was really good, and they're like making him believe they're gonna kill him, and then Gary shows up in the cop car, and this is also another very funny sequence of like action hero Gary sort of like saving the day, like sliding over like the squad car.
And it's funny how it's like scripted too, because he
they do show in like the after credits sequence that he's been like rehearsing like numerous times, like sliding over the hood of his squad car. But he like saves the day and shoots everyone, but also gets shot in the chest, and they're like offering to him on like what they think is like his deathbed, like, you know, like, Gary, like you can come to like every single game night after this, you're gonna pull through, you're gonna make it. And then he reveals like, oh, like I made this all up to get back into game night with you guys.
Right, yeah.
And like that's a good twist. And then like it ends up twisting again, which like I feel like in another movie it might have been like, all right, this is too much, like one twist is enough. But they do have a line at some point, I wish I could remember what it was, but Jason Bateman almost sort of like meta recognizes that, where he's like, seriously, like this is happening like again.
Yeah, no, I mean they have multiple things like that where
because Gary planned the kidnapping, but he had no idea about, like, he just planned the kidnapping to be like, oh, we kidnapped, you know, your brother, not realizing that his brother would think there was a reason he had been kidnapped and that there was actual people that were coming after him. Right. You know, and they end up showing up on the bridge at that moment, and that's when Michael C. Hall comes out with his goons, and they end up taking Kyle Chandler.
But they actually shoot Jesse Plemons.
Yeah.
And Jason Bateman is like, oh, did you like buy like a few extra like squibs at like the fucking like joke store or whatever, like something along those lines, and then he actually like fingers the actual wound hole, and he's like, ah! Yeah, and he's just. Yeah, and I mean, there's even something at the very end where they kind of also poke fun at, like, yes, we realize this is a lot of twist and this is a lot to follow for a comedy movie, is after they, like, kill or knock out Michael C. Shannon's character, and he's like, and Kyle Chandler, like, is like, yeah, and this was all to, like, teach you guys a lesson on, like, you know, like how to love each other or whatever. And he's like,
because before the whole Gary thing, Kyle Chandler reveals that like, oh, like I set up this game night specifically like so you would win because I felt so bad about everything, and like I wanted you to win the Stingray. Because before that they had been like, oh, he's just doing this to like fuck with us, like that's why the Stingray is the prize, because that was my favorite car growing up, and it's just another way for him to like rub it in our faces. And he reveals that like, no, like I set it up so that like you could win because I felt so bad about the way I've acted about everything. And
That was less believable for me, though.
was it?
Because there was no real. I don't know. It was just strange, and it seems like it fit into the plot at the time. But I feel like Kyle Chandler, kind of shows up to show off again, and it doesn't seem like after the first night where he like humiliates Jason Bateman at the game night hosted at their house that there's any sort of remorse for him. And again, he admits he's like, I want to have all you guys over to my house so I can show it off. And then again, he continues to show off by like hiring this kind of game company. He throws like the board game away when he was like, I set this all up just for you to have your dream car. I was kind of like, too little too late with the writing kind of for that scene.
They used maybe one or two more, like just some sort of like a shot of him looking remorseful after the first night or something.
Yeah.
But I did kind of buy into it because it's not like we ever doubted that they loved each other as brothers, but there was this sort of like competition going on of like.
But it was also, that's all Kyle Chandler's character has, is this appearance of looking good. I mean, at the end, it's revealed like, man, you have everything that I want, kind of. Mm-hmm. It didn't seem like there was a reason for him to be remorseful. It's kind of like, my whole life's a lie. Like, why would he feel bad for Jason Bateman? It's kind of like it was like this weird contradiction. Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of like, you have the perfect wife, you have the house, you have the job. I've been lying about the whole Wall Street thing. I'm actually in deep shit in like the fucking like dark web, all this other shit. Like, why would he show up, show off, and then suddenly be remorseful of somebody he's already jealous of? That part didn't add up to me.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that.
It was just kind of like something that fit into the plot. I mean, but again, you can question a lot of the stuff that happens in this film, and you just have to like hold on for like the absurdity of like truly what this plot is.
I mean, like especially when they get into like the whole like airport sequence where it's like even like they try to insert the whole concept of like, oh, someone go call the authorities. Like there's no like airport traffic controller there that's like, oh yeah, that plane just crashed while trying to take off. Like it's not like you just take off at an empty airport and they're just kind of like, all right, see ya. Like there's someone there that's like, okay, now you're cleared for takeoff because no one's trying to come in. So like there was a little bit of a suspension of disbelief there where you had to be like, oh, like no one at the air traffic tower like saw that plane crash into the ground. And hasn't sent out like an emergency crew like right away.
No matter how private the flight is, they have a control tower.
Yeah, they have to. Someone has to be watching and scheduling who's coming in and who's going out.
Especially post 9/11.
Yeah. Especially in a world with Harrison Ford as a pilot.
Yes. But yeah, no, that little thing between Kyle Chandler and Jason Bateman, I was like, I don't buy this. But I was like, I just like, I don't understand. Like, it would have been totally fine to like for him to just be a shitty person, kind of, because at the end he does reveal that he's still a shitty person. He sold this list of people
I think it was like them putting him back in the middle because it was like he sold the list, but he tipped everyone off, so no one actually got hurt.
But at a price, like there was just
right. So he's not a good person, but he's evening himself out by he's not letting anyone get hurt, but he's going to make a profit while doing it.
Right, but I think that was just like an extensive profit. I don't know. I was just kind of like, oh, like he's. Just
I think it was him profiting off of doing a good thing. Rather than doing a good thing because of profit.
Right.
I think he was gonna do the good thing either way, and he was just like, oh, but I could also make money while doing this. And
like a neutral,
I think that fits with his character.
Neutral evil kind of thing.
Yeah, like yeah. I don't know if neutral evil is the right word. I know what you're talking about. Like the middle of like the D&D grid of like alignment. Yeah. Maybe chaotic neutral is the word.
Yeah. I I don't know.
And then they tie everything up really nicely, which again, like I didn't really like it in the beginning of the movie, but I kind of ended up buying into once realizing that like, yeah, there's some plot holes here, but like for the most part, they did care about this script and they inserted a lot of really nice bookends where like they have that really cheesy like smile sequence in the beginning that I didn't like. It's kind of uncomfortable.
What was that?
When they first meet, they look at each other and they have like this like extended like straight on close up smile where each of them has this like goofy smile. They end up looking like puppies. They're smiling so big. And it's kind of cheesy in the beginning. And before you know that it's going to be a callback, I don't think I really like it. But then when they kind of close the movie on that of like when she reveals through Pictionary that she's pregnant and, you know, they're finally going to bring a kid into this world after this whole sort of up and down they've had with that whole plot line. They look at each other and they have a like slow motion like smile sequence again. It's just like a nice like bookend from that aspect of it. And I don't know. I appreciate when a movie and a script takes the time to just throw some of those things in, like even if it's not like a absolutely fantastic script through a lot of lenses, like it's much better than what we've been getting through a lot of, you know, comedy movies. And it doesn't feel like something that was just thrown out there. It feels like something that either someone very talented gave a little bit of effort on, or you know, someone decently talented gave a lot of effort on. If that makes sense, you know. Like,
no, that makes sense.
Someone who at least knew what they were doing with script writing tried a little bit on this movie, and there's a lot of parts of it that do work.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I like felt super emotional only around the time that I never really felt super empathetic for their relationship per se, but the Jason Bateman, my God, it is. I have a thing for fucking brothers. I should have been born with a brother or something. Jason Bateman solely taking responsibility for his brother and saying, nobody come along with me. This is my cross to bear, kind of. He's my brother, and this is what I need to do. And then, again, Rachel McAdams kind of coming with him, but then everybody else who's not totally involved, but kind of volunteering to come with him into this kind of like Fight Club, like rich, mob-oriented house, kind of doing a little monologue about, like, we don't come to game night because we're like competitive like you guys and you need to like prove this or whatever. They're like, we come to game night because we love you guys as people, and like we're all friends and everything. And I thought that was really sweet. That's like a really nice scene.
It was a nice scene. I wish they had established, again, like in the montage, like you said, just throw them in the wedding sequence.
Exactly.
Maybe they're there, but we don't, because it happens first, we don't know to be looking for them, I guess. I don't know. But again, they could have had lines like the guy with the glasses that has lines too, you know. If you had thrown them in there, it would have been more believable that like, oh, these are like lifelong friends.
Show history with them, right?
Yeah. Like rather, because when they first show up, it seems like they are just there for game night.
Yeah.
So when that scene comes around, I'm touched because they want me to be touched, but I'm also like, oh, I thought these were just the game night friends.
Right, yeah.
I thought they just got all tangled up in this weird plot.
Yeah, or especially when like he explains to the, what's his name, Billy, whatever his name is, explains to kind of like his Tinder date of the week. It's kind of like, oh, I know, you know, Jason Bateman through work, kind of. I wish there was like a little more like, I mean, people.
Is it
like,
through work? Because doesn't he know her through work?
Well, no, that's the next woman. He knows.
Oh, the actual Tinder. Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. But
they also never say where they work.
Yeah, no, same. Yeah, I'm also I was kind of sick of the use of Queen "Don't Stop Me Now" or whatever.
Did they use it more than once?
I think they used it twice, but I feel like that song just pops up everywhere.
It has to be one of those songs where like something about the rights to it was just released, because it was in Hardcore Henry.
Yeah.
It was in something else recently too.
It feels less like a rights thing and more like an immigrant song thing, where it's kind of like, all right, like yes, it evokes a certain emotion, but it's getting a little old now.
Yeah.
It's getting a little cliched. But yeah, what do you say we get into some fingers
Yeah, I think that's
for game night?
about time.
I'll go first because I've said everything I need to say. I think I'm gonna give this 3.5 fingers because it was one of the better movies that I've seen. It was one of the better comedies that I've seen. It was a little boring when it went straight action, when it went straight thriller, when it went straight kind of horror. When we split all these couples off into little groups, I thought the chemistry was lesser. But overall, it was it's a funny movie. I would have loved to not see it by myself with 3 like middle-aged cackling women in front of me. I would have loved to see it like on an actual date night. So if it's still out in theaters, yeah, I'd say
in a
consider
theater full
seeing
of high people.
Oh yeah, no. See, I saw it in a completely empty theater except for 3 like middle-aged white women in front of me.
It was still a pretty empty theater when I saw it, but everyone there was very high. It was just one big group of people that were there.
Well,
to see
Super
it.
Troopers 2 comes out on 420, so fucking. It's like, does it even like need to come out? Like, what is 420? It's a Friday, so that's not
It
a
does
bad
work
release
out.
date. Yeah.
You're done, or?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my piece.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it 3.5 as well. Just because I have not laughed this hard in a while for an actual comedy movie. Like I've had some full belly laughs. Like there was a few in Thor Ragnarok. There's definitely a few in Spider-Man: Homecoming. I laughed pretty hard during Lady Bard a few times, but not nearly as hard as I laughed in this. Especially at just Jesse Plemons. I'm so pleased with his performance in this movie. The character that they created, just the writing, the performance of it. The fact that I've never really seen him in a fully comedic role before. Like he's been in funny-ish roles before,
Right.
but he's like the funniest person in this movie, and I never would have really pegged him for that. But he also just slips into it so easily. Like it's because I think it's because he plays the role so seriously that it ends up working. Like he's not really like overacting anything. It's just that sort of like deadpan, awkward attitude that he delivers everything with that works so well. And I just appreciate the time they took with, certain elements of the script. There's other parts that I wish they took more time with. But there's definitely, elements and fingerprints of a great screenplay at work here. And I think they took their time with, some of the VFX, some of the soundtrack choices and the cinematography and stuff in this. And it just felt like a very complete movie. Like I felt like I watched something that somebody somewhere was sort of like it was their baby that they put out, know? Whereas like so many other comedy movies just feel like, all right, put this person on it, get this guy to direct it. We'll buy this script from this person and we'll throw these songs that we have the rights to at this point, and we'll just shove this shit out there and we'll get like, $40 million back on a $20 million script or whatever. And it felt like, I could imagine like a younger person. I know a younger person didn't write it, but I could imagine a younger person, having this like idea they couldn't get out of their head for this like game night type movie and writing all these. It just felt like care was put into this movie, and I appreciate that. And that coupled with the fact that I laughed very hard, I think 3.5 is a fair score for this. It's probably the best movie I've seen this year. We're only a couple movies in, but easily the best movie I saw this year. So another pretty easy score, 3.5 fingers for the podcast, since we both agreed on that. And that's about it. I never read the Rotten Tomatoes, which is not bad. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 82% based on 169 reviews with a weighted average of 6.7 out of 10. The website's critical consensus, reads, with a talented cast turned loose on a loaded premise and a sharp script loaded with dark comedy and unexpected twists, Game Night might be more fun than the real thing. And that's That's about all I got right now.
Well, that's all we need.
If you agree or disagree, leave a comment below on SoundCloud, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're listening and or finding out about us. We'd love to continue the conversation. As we're going to be saying for a while, please join our Facebook group if you love movies. Just search How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the Facebook group on Facebook. I'm sure we'll have a link somewhere on our Facebook somewhere if you search. It's just our group where we're posting articles and trailers and reviews and whatnot about movies so that we can all talk about them. You don't have to actually be a fan of the podcast. You can invite your friends who, maybe haven't listened to us yet but like movies. We just want to create a space where we can find like-minded people who like talking about movies and find movie news, share theories about movies and hot takes on movies and whatnot. So I think it could be a lot of fun. So definitely find us on there and join that group. And everything else you can pretty much find at howmanyfingerspodcast.com.
Go to it.
Please. That's all I got right now. So join us next week for Disney Oprah's A Wrinkle in Time and last week for Red Sparrow. And goodbye.
I'll see you later.
Be good.